This story took place many years ago. I was a 12-year-old boy and was spending the summer in the village, not knowing what lay ahead of me. It rained all summer and I spent most of June indoors. One evening my grandmother and I were waiting for my grandfather, who was working on a neighboring farm. Unfortunately, he had a drinking problem and we often worried about his return. The rain pounded insistently on the window. Grandma, running her hand through my hair, asked, "Hey, little boy, how about some coffee?" I agreed. She headed over to the stove and said, "Okay, baby." I turned to the window. Outside the window, an unhappy dog sat in his kennel, seemingly immersed in thought. "Hey, Max." I tapped on the window, trying to get the dog's attention. Max raised his head lazily, but immediately put it back down, not interested in anything. "Can I let him in, Grandma?" I asked pityingly. "Absolutely not. We don't need any extra clutter," replied Grandma firmly. I hung my head. Around 10 p.m., Grandma tucked in the sheets and I got ready for bed. It seemed that Grandpa wasn't coming in sober again. Looking out the window one last time, I noticed Max poking his nose out of his doghouse, and the downpour was getting heavier. I don't remember falling asleep, but I woke up in the middle of the night to a slight shiver and a wet lick on my cheek. Someone was licking me. It was my dog. "Hey, what are you doing here?" I muttered in surprise, half awake. Grandpa had a habit of letting the dog in the house when the weather was bad. I remembered the snowy winter night when he came home not sober and left the door wide open. The dog ran around me and then disappeared into the darkness. Rain pounded on the roof. Thunder rumbled in the distance. I stood on the icy floor and felt cold. "Grandma," I called softly. There was only silence in response. "Grandma," I called out a little louder. The house was eerily quiet. Fear settled in me. I staggered backward, tripped over a stool, and there was a loud cracking sound. It felt like I might wake the whole village, but the silence continued. I tried to turn on the light, but nothing worked. "Grandma," I called out again, flooding with tears. The tears were choking me and I was on the verge of hysterics. Trying to pull myself together, I got dressed and went into the next room. Finding matches on the dresser, I lit a candle. In the light of the candle, I saw a familiar interior. I went to my grandmother's room. When I reached the door, I pulled the handle, almost twisting my arm. The door was locked. I knocked and pressed my ear against it. Silence. Suddenly I heard the sound of breaking glass from inside. Startled, I hid behind the fireplace. The candle went out and there was darkness all around. I curled up in a ball and tried to come to my senses. I heard the door creak open, then heavy footsteps and loud breathing. It was unlike anything I'd heard before. Was it a person? I didn't know. Holding my breath, I listened carefully. I heard the creak of footsteps on the floor that slowly made their way toward my room. The stranger paused for a moment, and my breathing froze as well. He seemed to be listening to every rustle. Suddenly the silence was broken by a loud dog barking. The heavy footsteps continued on their way and soon left the house. Coming out of my hiding place, I found the lost candle and with trembling hands I lit it again. I headed towards my grandmother's room. The door was ajar. Reluctantly, step by step, I approached it. My heart was ready to burst out of my chest. The wind blew in through the open window, extinguishing the flames. I took a step into the darkness. The eerie sounds of nature came from outside. A few more steps and I saw it. A bright bolt of lightning flooded the room with blinding light. In front of me lay the decapitated body of my grandmother. Everything around her was drenched in blood, as if rivers of red wine had flooded every crevice. The severed head lay on the floor with eyes wide open with horror. I couldn't stay on my feet and fell, hitting my head on something bulky, almost without regaining consciousness. An unknown force helped me out. Jumping out into the courtyard, I ran toward the nearby houses. Numb with shock, I couldn't speak. I spotted a dead dog. It was Max. Someone had smashed his head in. I ran away from the house that had once been home and was now a stranger. My feet sank into the mud that engulfed my shoes, barely allowing me to hold on to them. Her head was spinning, and everything around her seemed to spin with it. Black figures appeared, mocking and taunting me. Gathering all my strength, I took a deep breath and let out one last, long scream. Finally, familiar silhouettes appeared in the distance, my neighbors. I ran towards them and fell unconscious. It was a sunny day when I stretched lazily and reluctantly opened my eyes. The bed was warm and cozy. The room was flooded with sunlight, and it took me a while to settle in. This feels so good, I thought. This was a dream. Despite everything, I love this house.